afternoon, everybody. Welcome to tonight's session. If you're wondering, Gavin's had new equipment. He ain't got a clue what he's doing. This could be fun. I am delighted tonight to present to you Lynn Howe from Positive Young Minds, who is going to talk to us about communication as SENCOs with our parents, our stakeholders, our SLT, because that's always a fun one to have a communication barrier with. Fun, yeah, interpretation of fun.
I'm getting good at this. There you go. You do it that way.
Yeah, he's got it at last. There's Lynn. How are you doing today, Lynn?
I'm very well, thank you. Lots of juggling and getting stuff done, and it's great working from home because you can really cut it fine, can't you, on getting to things, but you know, that's not so good sometimes.
Yeah, it just means you don't stop.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Brilliant. So we're looking forward to tonight's session. We're going to pass over to you. Have we got slides?
Ooh, there we go. So Gavin and I have got a thing going where if I do the elephant, like the elephant in the room, he changes the slide. So this might go well, it might not. We'll see how it works. So Gavin's got control of the PowerPoint this evening. But thank you very much for coming, and it's great to be here. Nice to meet you, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of the session. But obviously you can always you can ask questions after, and also if you want to PM me, etc., email me if you want any further clarification on anything. That's okay as well. So let's test the elephant out. Brilliant. Seamless. So just a little bit about me then. I'm the author of Positive Young Minds blog. I'm a writer as well for special needs and wellbeing articles, and I've written for some education support, and I'm also the editor of Teacher Toolkit as well. I do wellbeing and SEND consultancy and train SENCOs. I'm an educational author as well of Hinton House, and my book is it's been about to be released for some time now. Unfortunately, the editor left at Hinton House, so it's a bit on hold at the moment, but it's available for pre-order. That's all about sort of starting out as a SENCO. I've also got my first children's book, which I can show you at the end, and I'm a massive advocate for SEND and inclusion, as well as teacher and school wellbeing. And you can follow me on Twitter and actually any other social media as well, because I'm kind of trying to get everywhere. I think I've probably spread myself a bit too thinly in many ways on social media, and I've just been hearing about the new one. Is it Threads today? I'm not even sure I want to join another one. I'm not sure if I've got the capacity, but we shall see how it goes. Thank you. Here we go. Perfect. So my mission then, just for wellbeing and schools, etc. Happy staff equals happy children, and then you're always going to get good or better outcomes. And I've got a lobster here, a rainbow lobster. I've called him Clyde, like kaleidoscope, because he's colourful. But the idea is it's kind of a pincer movement, because you've got your top-down approach for the organisations, head teachers, etc., Ofsted and government and those support services for all that wellbeing. And then you've got your bottom-up approach with individuals and school staff, and just empowering people to set their own boundaries and make their own choices, really. So the agenda this evening, we've got part 1 about SLT, part 2 about parents, and then questions and other stuff at the end. So within the SLT section, we've got the 4 categories of SLT person, some of the barriers to engagement, how to get them on side, and then hopefully all this will equate to being one big happy school family. Right, so I thought we'd do like a little multiple choice personality quiz to start with. So I've got a few different questions for you. So just think in your heads whether it's going to be mostly A's, mostly B's, mostly C's, or mostly D's. So just think in your heads about 4 questions, which one that describes your leader the best, basically, or leaders. You might have one particular one in mind. So question 1, so Jay is a new pupil. He's displaying challenging behaviours which your leader has not seen before. Do they, A, book a meeting with you as soon as possible and make a 25-part action plan to move forward with parents involved? Do they, B, say to you, go to Jay's classroom and just sort it all out? Do they, C, shout at Jay? Jay's very confused and your leader can't understand why Jay is not conforming, because that's always worked for them in the past. Or D, do they leave you to sort it out, and then once excellent provision is in place, take all the credit for it without even mentioning you? So just think about which things that your leaders might do in your schools. And question 2, for universal provision needs improving, as staff are not aware of high quality teaching strategies and are not aware of the whole school approaches to SEND. So does your leader listen to your concerns and work with you to ensure there's a tri-weekly staff meeting dedicated to SEND and high quality teaching and clear training plan? Do they B, listen to your concerns and agree to staff meeting time so that you can plan, implement and check everything autonomously? Do they C, agree to a 10-minute staff meeting slot every half term? Because let's face it, it's not as if this small minority are even going to pass their SATs, so why bother anyway? Or do they D, agree to staff meeting time, but won't let you introduce an evidence-based school self-regulation strategy, instead making you implement some bizarre and random strategy that no one has heard of, possibly because they've had a good sales pitch on it? And the last question, I think a whole school approach to improving reading is required. Does your leader work with you to ensure that the approach works for all learners and have non-negotiable displayed in every classroom to ensure that those with literacy difficulties are always adapted for? Do they B, let you run with whatever you want, but it's a challenge to keep momentum going and it's not top of the agenda for your leader's medium or long-term plans? Do they C, your leader suggests that you take all the children who are struggling, put them with an LSA in a corner so they can work through a Twinkle-style workbook? I shouldn't have said Twinkle there, should I really? But there we go, while the rest of the class is studying an exciting historical text. Or D, does your leader tell you to introduce an initiative whereby a child who struggles with reading always sits next to a fluent reader without any adaptation so that they can pick up reading through osmosis? So have a think about what your leader might do. Oh, and at SLT meetings, are you always a full part of the whole meeting, able to put your ideas forward for every aspect of the leadership team's agenda? The school development plan is closely linked to SEND. Or B, part of the meeting and the head appreciates your input as they hadn't considered the SEND perspective before. C, part of the meeting, but sometimes only the first bit, so you can do your report, then leave so the grown-ups can talk about the important stuff. Or D, are you part of the meeting or not invited, but either way, the head thinks they are so knowledgeable they can make all the major decisions on your behalf anyway. Okay, so if you got mostly A's, I mean, these are loose terms, loose boxes, so it might be that your head or your leaders are in sort of one or two of the camps or a mixture of all of them. So mostly A's is for the inclusion guru. So this person understands inclusion and SEND really well. They might be a qualified SENCO themselves. So good things about this, they're really knowledgeable and helpful with SEND at the forefront. They've got joined up thinking with whole school initiatives. They've pushed from the top, so the whole SLT and school is on board. And the cons, I've worked with one of these heads and they're wonderful, but it can be a little bit overwhelming for the SENCO because you turn up and you've got this massive to-do list and they're on it all the time, which is brilliant. But at the same time, you know, you've got your own agenda and sometimes the head's agenda can be a little bit enthusiastic, let's say. But, you know, overall, really useful to have on board. So mostly B's, it's the haven't got a Scooby-Doo head, have no idea, but they're happy for you to tell them what is needed. So the pros are they are happy for you to lead your area and get on with it, so they can take advice and they're happy to listen to your perspective. And the cons sometimes is that they haven't really got SEND at the forefront. Sometimes it's overlooked in whole school development because they just don't understand it very well. If you scored mostly C's, you've got the traditionalist. They're rather old-fashioned in their thinking and don't have much of an idea. They're quite rigid in their understanding of SEND. So I can't think of any necessarily good things about this, but hopefully they could be coaxed into some more modern ways depending on their personality, possibly with some research findings. And cons, there are loads of clashes with parents quite often and parents of SEND pupils. So you're the middleman and the buffer between those parties. And the egotist, D, they think they understand SEND really well, but actually have no idea. And I think this is probably the worst leader that you could possibly work for from an SEND perspective. So there's no telling them at all. And you kind of just have to sing to their tune, whether you like it or not. Your school might actually resemble a slight dictatorship and in other areas as well, because they just don't listen. So There might also be other issues due to your structure of your school. So it might not be your head teacher that is the concern. It might be someone above the head teacher. If you're in a MAP, for example, and it's a big MAP, then there might be someone sitting in their ivory tower making all these decisions for you. It doesn't necessarily help your school. So hopefully that provided you with some insights of the different styles of leadership that might take place in our schools. Just a little bit of research that's been out this week. This is the Pearson School Report, a new survey of 6,000 teachers and senior leaders across England from June 23 shows supporting children with SEND is one of the top 5 expected challenges in schools over the next 12 months. That's no surprise, is it? So the report shows that 69% of teachers responding said that the current education system is ineffectively supporting SEND pupils in their aspirations and achievements. So, regardless of what type of head teacher or leaders that you have in your school, you've got all these massive barriers anyway. So there's lots and lots of barriers to SLT engagement with SEND. So this is kind of a bit like bingo. So you kind of decide how many that you score. Hopefully it's a low number, but I wonder if anybody will get all 9. So head teacher engagement with SEND can vary wildly, really, and it can be influenced by several of these barriers. So here are some of the common ones. First of all, you've got a lack of awareness and understanding. Some head teachers might have limited knowledge and understanding of SEND, including specific needs and challenges faced by students with disabilities. This lack of awareness can lead to a reluctance to engage actively and address these issues. Also, they might have had limited training and professional development opportunities within their development. Head teachers may not have received adequate training or CPD focused on SEND, and without the necessary knowledge and skills, they might struggle a little bit to effectively engage and support students with special needs. So they might have moved up the leadership ladder quite fast and possibly have less experience with classroom teaching. And also, as we know, on initial teacher training, that the SEND element is a little bit limited. And I think over the years, I've picked up more through classroom teaching than I actually have through any sort of continuing professional development I've done as a teacher. So that's something to be aware of as well. Obviously, we've got time constraints and competing priorities. Head teachers have numerous responsibilities, including the curriculum management and staff, etc., and overall school admin. Time constraints and competing priorities make it challenging for them to devote sufficient attention and resources to SEND-related matters, because generally, like the rest of us, they're always firefighting. Financial constraints, as we know, limited resources act as a barrier as well. In order to adequately support students, we need an awful lot of finances, which we don't have for specialised staff and equipment and resources. And when budgets are tight, it can be very difficult deciding where to spend the money. Also, support structures. So the absence of robust support structures in schools can hinder head teachers as well with engagement. So this also includes things like the specialised staff and the SENCOs. And it's also a little bit about training up your LSAs, really, in things such as speech and language, because if you've got really good high quality teaching and really well trained LSAs, and hopefully these support structures will be improved. Also, challenges in collaboration. Effective engagement with SEND often requires collaboration and coordination among various stakeholders in the school, teachers, parents, external agencies, your local authorities. Difficulties in maintaining these effective partnerships can impede head teacher engagement in this area as well. And I know, particularly for local authorities, they can vary greatly from county to county. Pressure to achieve academic outcomes. In some cases, head teachers might have a significant amount of pressure. Sometimes their governors are doing that. Sometimes they're putting that pressure on themselves, and they're prioritising these in order to get the results rather than worry about what's underlying. Unfortunately, as we know, if you take a bit more of a longer term approach, if you did all the foundation work, then you'd automatically get better results anyway. But I think a lot of TED teachers, in terms of the firefighting that they seem to think they need to do, is kind of more of a sticking plaster approach rather than actually getting to grips with all the underpinning things that are needed in order to make learning better for everyone. So it's kind of that tunnel vision, really. Also, in terms of the SLT controlled by the higher power, you'll also find, as well as I was saying, that you might have people in their ivory tower in maps dictating what you need to do as well. And also bending to parental whims as well. So depending on your head teacher, some of them like to keep parents happy, even though it's not necessarily best practice. So that's also something to consider. So addressing these barriers kind of requires a multifaceted approach that includes targeted professional development and adequate resources and support structures, and also a whole school commitment to inclusion. So it's really important to promote awareness, provide training opportunities and sufficient resources, just establishing those effective partnerships to enhance head teacher engagement with SEND. But you know, that's saying it, quite often as a SENCO, you're the one in one corner sort of shouting into an empty forest. I sort of liken it to Twitter really, because when you put a tweet out, you're sort of shouting into an empty forest sometimes, and no one hears you. And it's great that you're fighting your corner and you need to do that, but if no one's hearing you in your school, it can be a massive challenge. And I know in one establishment I worked in, I was kind of so sick of banging my head against a wall that I made the decision to leave and find somewhere that was a little bit more inclusive, with a little bit better inclusive practices. So that might be something, particularly if you've got bingo on all those things, that you might like to consider as well. So in reality then, I appreciate that if you're not a head teacher, these are all massive, massive challenges. So effective SEND and anything else in school needs to come from the top down to be properly embedded. So in an ideal world, how can you get them on side? This is an ideal world that if you had a little bit, of kudos and power and influence within your school, which hopefully you do because you're on the senior leadership team, so you could put some of these into practice. So first of all, raising awareness and understanding. So start by raising awareness, understanding among the school leaders about the importance and impact of SEND, provide them with the information and the research and case studies that just demonstrate benefits of inclusive education and the value of supporting students with special needs, as well as how it impacts all students. And then, of course, professional development and training, offer targeted professional development and training opportunities for school leaders as well to enhance their knowledge and skills related to SEND. This could include workshops, seminars, online things. I'll just tap into what's available. I'm available, Abigail's available. So there's lots of online resources that you can use in order to do this. It's just kind of promoting it to get them on side, to get the leaders to put it on their priority list, really. Creating a shared vision for inclusive education and within your school community. Involve the school leaders in that and development of this vision to ensure there's buy-in and ownership and commitment. So articulating values and goals that underpin inclusive culture and just emphasising the importance of meeting the needs of all students. It's probably likely that your school mottos and etc. have something about inclusion in them already, but you might actually think when you read that motto, what's it actually doing in practice? Is it actually doing what it says on the tin? So developing those inclusive policies and procedures, collaborating with school leaders just to develop and implement those inclusive policies and procedures that support students with SEND, ensuring that those policies align with national and local guidelines and regulations as well. Allocating resources effectively. So you might have a big say in this, you might have no say in this, depending on your leaders. So I've worked in places where, I'd sit down with the head teacher and actually would deploy the support staff and the class teachers, together as SLT within meetings, which actually meant that I could consider which students are going in which class and which ones were going to be a clash and which LSAs which worked well with which students. But I've also worked in other places where head teachers done it and haven't really considered some of these issues, and they've had sort of problems come September. So just advocate for those resources to be put in the correct directions. So working with school leaders to identify and allocate resources such as funding, technology, etc. Easier said than done with those lack of budgets, I know. Foster the collaboration, teamwork, so encourage collaboration among school leaders and teachers and support staff, and promote regular communication and coordination. If that's, getting it in a staff meeting as much as possible, then that'd be good. So kind of insist that you have that staff meeting time because it's well needed. Also monitoring progress and celebrating success. So just like if you're talking to the children, your head teachers and your leaders probably don't get very much praise. So if they do something really well, inclusive or otherwise that's really good for SEND, then just tell them how much you appreciate it and how great it is, even though it's quite a small thing. So it might also work on your other half as well. We'll have to see. So test out that theory that just like the children, the adults like a bit of praise as well. Parent and student involvement, involving parents and students with SEND in decision-making processes as well, seeking their feedback and input. Make sure that SEND students are also on the school council and are represented there as well. And hopefully by following these steps that you can work towards getting school leaders on side. As I said, this is an ideal world. So I appreciate, of course, that if you're not the leader in this case, sometimes getting it on whole school agenda can be a little bit more challenging, but do your best. So these are kind of my other top tips for what else you can try if all those things don't work. So you've got the drip-feed approach, so little and often is quite handy just in terms of getting those inclusive practices in. Also asking professionals to suggest whole school training when they visit. So if you've got a specialist teacher, so for example, had a specialist teacher that used to come in for visual impairment, and I knew that staff really had no empathy or didn't have a good understanding in order for them to create good empathy of the condition that the child had. And they didn't understand just things like how the surfaces of the carpets and two different surfaces could cause a problem for this child that's visually impaired. So actually written into the report of their visit, I said to her, please could you write in that we need whole school training on this so that it gets into the staff training kind of agenda. And so use your professionals where you can if you think that there's a training area lacking, and use your LA as well if you can in order to get some free training depending on how helpful they are as well. Using the Ofsted agenda as a carrot, because I don't often say much that's good about Ofsted, but I think one thing over the last few years that has improved is that SEND is definitely interweaved within the whole agenda. So when you have your Ofsted inspection and the inspector wants to see exactly what's going on in class, which children have SEND and how well they're catered for, I think that's kind of quite a positive of where Ofsted's gone. So if you want to dangle the Ofsted carrot in front of them and say, look, you need to have this really good provision for these children, it's all very well having it on paper, but does it triangulate to what's actually happening in real life? I've got a bit of a horror story here I can share with you, because at one place I worked, we had lots of unqualified teachers and not a lot of LSAs, and I sort of had to explain in a Mockstead how we had not many people from supporting the children with the EHCPs, and that was kind of an issue with funding and resources, and the people at the top were not listening, and I was kind of trying to fight my corner without much success. So that kind of gave them a bit of a rude awakening as to what was actually required in that setting, and that was the setting that I left as well as a result, because they were not meeting inclusion. I could not see any way that I could fix it just as one person when the leadership was so against what needed to be done. So yeah, the Ofsted agenda is quite a useful carrot sometimes. Keep dropping in best practice evidence and current research into conversations. You can also suggest leadership SEND training. I've got an example of that later as well. Making an effort to build relationships, even if the leaders are challenging, just like you would with a pupil. So I don't know, find out what their favourite food is, find out what their sports are, what they like doing in their spare time, and kind of capitalise on that really. Just like you'd get a challenging pupil on side, see if you can get your challenging head teacher on side in the same way using those tactics. So it could be an interesting experiment for you to try, if nothing else. Also getting other staff on side to help as well. So if you know that you're going to a staff meeting when you've got people who will be against your ideas, if you go to them first before the staff meeting and get them to input their ideas first, and then you can refer to them in the staff meeting and say, oh look, this person said this and agreed that this was a great idea, and then they'll go, yeah, it is a great idea. And sometimes those people who are the blockers, as I like to call them in staff meetings, and then some of the other staff will follow them, and then they'll be on side as a result as well. So that's quite a useful tactic to use. And of course, parental surveys as well to ascertain the general mood around SEND, because if the parents aren't happy with provision and the attitude of the senior leadership team or the head teacher, then that's useful to know in black and white as well, so that can be presented to them. So again, if these things are all not helping, just in terms of your provision, your profession and your professionalism in schools, it might be time for a rethink, because that's always the bottom line, isn't it? If you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, is it time for a rethink? So here's some training that I put together, which is on a resource for Teacher Toolkit as well. So there's a big document that can be downloaded, which is all about SEND for school leaders. So you might suggest that they download that and have a little look through that as well. And I've just added a section there about things that would really support your SENCO, because as a SENCO, trying to work with various senior leadership, these are all things that would have helped me. So you can dangle the Bath Spa University research in front of them just to find out a little bit more about how much release time you should be getting, for example. Ensure your SENCO has a seat at the SLT table. Just best practice dictates that the SENCO is in an SLT position, so make sure that you're on that. Joined up thinking when it comes to staff with targets for development. So don't double a teacher's workload with two sets of targets, because when SLT are going around giving targets out and then you're giving out targets as well, then that's not great. Working with your SENCO on pupil progress, making sure that you've got joined up thinking on that, and just thinking that many SENCOs report that the wider school community has absolutely no idea what they do. So let staff know how hard the SENCO is working and on what they're working on, and how high quality teaching supports for learners. Ensure that universal provision is successful and well resourced. Support your SENCO with their SENCO training or any other required professional development, so whether that's release time, etc. Have social and emotional skills at the heart of your curriculum and work towards high levels of staff wellbeing. Support your SENCO by getting them an assistant or admin support. They are expensive, so don't use them for filings. That's a really useful thing to make your SENCO happy. And many SENCOs feel that SLT have no idea what they do, so show an interest. So these are all top tips for your head teacher and leadership team and how to treat your SENCO. So it might be worth getting them to download this document to help. And of course, if all these things were in place, that would equal one big happy school family and one deliriously happy SENCO. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas, and you can run with some of those and see where you end up. Maybe get yourself some quick wins, get yourself some more medium-term ideas and some more long-term ideas with a plan about how to get your SLT on side a bit more. And good luck, really, for that one. So moving on to parents. So we're just going to go through categories of parents, barriers to parental engagement with SEND, how to get them on side, and then some top tips for school avoiders as well. Ooh, banging my laptop. So we've got, again, some basic parent categories. So I like to put things in tidy boxes. Of course, there's probably some overlap, hence a Venn diagram. So you've got the parent with too much time on their hands, the parent you never see, the parent who is never happy, and then you've got the parent who is 100% engaged and helpful in a non-annoying and realist sort of way. And these are always good to have on site, and they're probably the ones that you invite to come on school trips and things as well. So there's probably a combination of above. So I've had over the years so many different types of parent. It's like you can never club them all together in the same category because they're all so different. So there's the parent that I've had who wanted updating every day, even if their child is doing well in class. The parent that never attends anything and you can never get hold of them. The parent you have to attend meetings with the social worker, and foster parent, which can be a little bit awkward when you've got more sets of people there. The parents who know their rights and the law much better than you do. That's never fun when you're trying to exclude somebody. That wasn't a fun meeting. And parents who are eternally grateful for all your help and support. You get those as well. Parents who have significant anxiety in general about their children's provision, and then that anxiety quite often leaks onto their children. Parents that won't admit there's an issue and have misguided aspirations for their children. Parents who find issues when there are no issues. Parents where you can spot traits of the child and you can see where some of the issues have come from. And the parents who prefer their child was in specialist provision despite the child achieving well in mainstream. and also the parents who refuse to consider the specialist provision, even though it might be the best thing for the child, and the parents who have difficulty with reading and writing themselves and had bad experience of schools, who therefore find it really difficult to engage. So the list goes on and on and on, and I kind of regularly remind myself that unless I've kind of walked a year in these people's shoes, I really shouldn't judge them. And it's from this stance that I start every parental relationship. And I have to say that after 22 years of teaching, that I'm a lot less judgmental than I was when I first started, because I think when I first started teaching that I kind of got the ideas and of what parents should be from other teachers, basically, who were judgmental themselves. So I possibly didn't have the right role models there for that. So I have to say, over the years, it's been a really steep learning curve in order to develop my empathy and compassion for people who are really struggling. And the more I get to know these families, the more I can kind of empathise with their issues, really. So this is from the stance that I kind of go to every parental relationship. So I've got more involved with parents over the last sort of 5 years, and kind of try to go over and above where families need help with forms, general advice, that sort of thing. I'm a great advocate for schools taking on the role of community hubs as well. And I think our sense of community has kind of been lost over the years, and schools are always a central place for large groups of adults to meet. So I think really with the right funding that we could probably get a lot more parents on board by being more community minded and less standoffish in general. So this varies from school to school, I know, but if we can go into the community and kind of meet them halfway a bit, then I think that would really help. So there's lots of barriers to parental engagement, and lots of them, might be some of these, might be all of them, but here are some common ones that you might find. So lack of awareness and understanding. Some parents might have limited knowledge and understanding of SEND, including specific needs and challenges that their child faces. This lack of awareness can make it difficult for them to actively engage with school and support their child's educational journey. Communication barriers. There might be language barriers or cultural differences or limited communication channels. This can impede effective communication between school staff and SEND parents, and inadequate or ineffective communication can lead to misunderstandings and frustration, and also a lack of engagement. There might be negative past experiences, previous negative experiences within the education system, or just feeling unheard and unsupported in the past can make parents hesitant to engage with the school. These experiences can create a lack of trust as well and affect their willingness to actively participate in school activities. And I have to say, a particular group that I've found over the years just to link to is travelling communities. So they have a serious mistrust of education in general. So getting them on side has been a particular challenge. Time constraints as well and other responsibilities. Many SEND parents have multiple responsibilities, so managing their child's care, attending therapy appointments, advocating for their needs, and this can make it a challenge for them to attend school meetings, etc., over and above that as well. Inaccessibility of school environment. There might be physical barriers such as inaccessible buildings or limited accommodation for parents who've got disabilities themselves. This can hinder engagement as well. There might be lack of transport options as well. And emotional and psychological factors. Parents of SEND pupils might experience higher levels of stress, anxiety, or emotional burden due to the additional challenges they face. And these factors can impact their capacity and willingness to engage with the school. Lack of confidence and empowerment. Parents might feel overwhelmed or lack confidence in their ability to contribute effectively to their child's education. They might feel intimidated by the school environment or unsure about how to navigate the educational system. And of course, some of the parents might have special needs themselves, which is also something to consider. And limited resources and support, so inadequate access to resources, information and support networks, which can impede parents' ability to engage with the school as well. There might be financial constraints or limited access to support organisations, which can all create barriers. And we know that everyone's trying to work together to support parents, but actually we also know that in terms of social care, etc., they're at breaking point as well. So there's a lot less available than there perhaps was before. So Just in terms of the hard to reach parent label, I was reading this article the other day. Just if you can reframe that hard to reach statement as seldom heard or ignored or undisturbed or underreached, then that might help in terms of thinking about it. So hard to reach is a phrase that's used commonly to describe certain communities who are perceived to be disengaged. To me, it implies blame on the communities themselves rather than questioning why the organisation isn't easily accessible. Disregards the many barriers faced by individuals such as socio-economic factors. Let's reframe and rephrase to truly be inclusive instead of divisive. So this is an article by Halima Ali, which is really interesting as well if you want to have a look at the link there. And she says, as a South Asian female Muslim, I fit the narrative for someone who is portrayed in the media as needing liberation. People like me are portrayed as the voiceless with saviour-like organisations wanting to provide me that voice. Thank you, but I already have a voice, just like everybody else in the so-called hard-to-reach communities. It's up to organisations to provide a platform for that voice. Outreach is the key. To find or discover people, you must communicate with them and go with them. So it's really important if you meet communities halfway. You could offer things like CV writing, for example. You could offer IT skills in schools. There's lots of things you could do to engage those communities, and just picking up the phone and talking to them. That's a really good start as well. So just consider then, I've got a scale there for 1 to 0 to 10, or 0 being not at all and 10 being absolutely excellent. Just consider where your school lies on these areas. So are you able to provide clear and accessible information about SEND services, rights and resources to parents? Are you able to implement effective communication channels such as translated materials, interpreters or online platforms to bridge language and cultural gaps? Can you offer flexible meeting times and alternative methods of participation such as virtual meetings or online forums to accommodate parent schedules and accessibility needs? Can you provide training and workshops to parents to enhance their knowledge, skills and confidence in advocating for their child's needs? Can you cultivate a welcoming and inclusive school environment that values and respects the diverse backgrounds and experiences of parents' ideas? Now, this can come from Chris Dyson's Parkland's book as well, a bit of a self-Chris there, because if you can meet your community in the middle, he explains in his book how one of the most deprived estates in Leeds, he's turned that round into an outstanding school where they've got so much money coming in from businesses that they've had helicopter rides in the playground, and they found that they didn't, children and the parents didn't have enough money for Christmas, so he threw a Christmas party as well, and it is proper home from home. It's a proper family, and because they know that Chris went out on a limb for them to do their bit in terms of the school meeting the community in the middle, then that means that the community will do absolutely anything for that school, and as a result, the tables and the results have gone through the roof. So it's a really good example of how, if you raise aspirations and raise that community engagement, then you can certainly get where you need to be. So also establishing those strong support systems within the school, including designated staff or parental liaisons to address specific needs and concerns for SEND parents and all parents. And one school I worked in had a pastoral lead, which was really helpful. So that also helped with all the safeguarding side of things. And again, just meeting the needs of community, really. Find out from the community what they need, and that will really help as well. So also, just in terms of my go-to strategies that have worked for me over the years, definitely phone calls to parents. So the pandemic certainly taught me a lot about reaching out to parents. So after lockdown was over, I knew so much about every family, and they would even ask me advice on just really random subjects. So I think I was having conversations about toothache and baby weaning and their other pupils' secondary school, things like that. So, we quickly established a lot higher rapport than in previous years. So I was very keen to keep this aspect going once we were back to business as usual. And so I went to the most challenging parents first to get them on side. And if you can have a laugh and a joke with them, then that's even better. So I've quite often found that parents who won't talk to other members of staff will come to me, or there's like the office staff refuse to talk to certain parents because of how abrupt they are, but actually I get on with them really well. And I kind of feel that it's just sometimes it's that person's way of communicating. They might say F every other word, but actually, you know, if that's their way of communicating, and if they're loud and that's what their role models did to them, then that's how they're going to communicate. And actually, even if they're shouting at you, sometimes that's just the way they speak. So I think sometimes it's just a case of cutting through kind of your opinions and kind of really meeting them where you need to meet them, just so that you can get that relationship going, and then you can get some really strong relationships with parents. Parental questionnaires are great as well. At the end of the year, I used to send out an online questionnaire. I've got an end of year survey as well on my website, which you can ask for access for, and I can then add you on it as it's a Google form, and then you can change it to suit your school. So I sent it to all parents, even if they chose not to take part. At least they were asked, and they could add their ideas to there. I'll let them do it anonymously, but it's sometimes not very helpful if they've got negative comments to do it anonymously, because you'd much rather they own the comment and actually then so you could sort it out. So if you encourage them to put their name to it, then that would be helpful as well. Coffee mornings, so time and time again these have come up as a go-to strategy for people. They are hit and miss in terms of engagement, so my preference would be here to get together in a cluster of schools and run it between you, so inviting experts from your local LA or team or a local charity to speak about sensory needs or boundaries at home or whatever. So you could also run it as a Zoom meeting to see if that improves uptake as well, and by doing it this way then you can also develop networking opportunities with other SENCOs and other schools and parents from different schools as well, and then they can chat, and then you're not left with a low turnout. So yes, if you can link up with others, if you can, that's great. Difficult conversations. So for example, you might have to have I'm not really sure this is the right setting for your child conversation. That's always a challenge. Or I think we might need to get your child seen by a specialist. Could you take them to the doctor? These are hard conversations to have, but there's no way around it. You kind of have to approach it head on. So just make sure you set up a proper meeting and just warn the parents, maybe by phone when you book them in, because no one wants something sprung on them in a meeting. Now, I've had this in various ways where some of the meetings I've been absolutely dreading, and the parents are actually, oh no, that's what we were going to do anyway. And oh, thank goodness for that. And then I've had other meetings which I thought would go fine, and actually the parent was really taken aback by what we were saying. So it can go either way. So if you are suggesting that you're going to take their child to the GP to get the ball rolling, I've kind of used the phrases like, well, you know, there's a long waiting list, so it's good to rule out any difficulties now, really. And I've had, some parents who thought it would be tricky, but then agreed to it. Others who really did not. And you might want to ask for backup from your senior leadership team as well, if that's going to help you, depending on the parent. Also, in terms of EHCP needs, when the school is struggling to meet those needs, it's important to let the parent know and work with them. So it might be that the local authority needs to see what's going on for itself and then suggest training and resources so that needs can be met. You might need to have an extraordinary annual review meeting if it's not working out, if there's an issue with the funding, if you need more money, if the banding needs to be raised. You can apply for more if you can get an EP. I know they're very challenging to get hold of at the moment to visit, to provide more up-to-date advice. But my advice is for anything EHCP related, just make yourself a nuisance until you get the answer you want, basically. So they'll soon get sick of you and do what you want, I've found generally. So just in terms of the banding, if you haven't got enough money for a pupil, then just keep going back until you get what you need. So sometimes parents can be unhappy about you repeating the same messages over and over again, and they decide to take their pupils elsewhere, and this is ultimately their prerogative, and I never let it bother me, and it doesn't make me think that I failed that family. I can give an example that of a pupil where I secured the EHCP for him. We suggested that we couldn't necessarily meet his complex needs in our school at the time. Parents were not happy, took him to a smaller local school, and this placement also broke down and he was excluded. And then a sort of specialist setting was agreed. However, it kind of needed that extra placement for the parents to go, actually, maybe it wasn't the school. So I think it's really better for the parents sometimes to get that second opinion, and then they get a kind of more well-rounded idea of where their child's at and what their child's needed. So, I never worry about the parent taking the child elsewhere, because ultimately, if you're not meeting their needs and you feel you can't meet their needs, then they're welcome to try somewhere else. So another example was a pupil whose mother, who had a complex issues herself, was also being investigated by social services, took him to another local setting as well, then another, until eventually she conceded that a specialist setting would be better. What she also didn't realise was that we do handovers, so we actually give all the information to the new setting. So, even though she was trying to run away from the fact that her parenting skills were lacking and social services were involved, she was hoping that all the evidence would kind of not follow her. But oddly enough, because of the handovers and things, and all the information was sent over. I think that the funniest one was when she took this poor child out from our mat school into another mat school because she didn't realise it was in the same mat. So that was a bit of a learning curve for her as well about that information. So, it's a shame that some of these needs were not met sooner and more effectively. And obviously there's a nationwide issue just in terms of resourcing and funding for our schools. So it's not something to keep individual SENCOs awake at night, but as I said, it often takes several schools for a parent to understand the situation fully, or a medical diagnosis. If they've got a medical diagnosis as well, then the parent then actually concedes and goes, oh yeah, maybe we need to put something extra in here. So it might be that their pupil or their child will thrive somewhere else and not at your school. So it sometimes takes parents a little bit longer to accept things, but keep working on it. And, I've had happy ending stories of pupils that have moved schools and have thrived at their very small school because my school was massive. And Chelsea, he went from my school to an enhanced provision in a mainstream setting and did very well as well. So, I always love sort of finding out how well they're doing in their new settings as well. So this kind of opens up the age-old inclusion debate, really. So, if it's done well, if mainstream schools had all the funding and resourcing that they needed, then we wouldn't need as many specialist setting places. But unfortunately, with the resources as the way they are, it's getting more and more challenging in order to meet these complex needs. And the worst thing is if you're sitting in a meeting and the school isn't meeting the needs of the pupil, but you have to be on the side of the school. That is a massive challenge. So you have to kind of say to them, look, I know I can hear where you're coming from, but I have to take the school stance on this, whereas your personal stance might be completely different. So in these situations, I'd always suggest that you put it in writing, or the parent puts it in writing if they want to take it a bit further, because actually sometimes the parents certainly have a point. So just on to school trauma then, this kind of refers to what a child ends up with if the basics that they're entitled to are not provided. It's kind of quite a new term that's coming in, and despite our best efforts, the setting is still wrong, and it's not what any of us want for our young people. And I think increasingly now some of these pupils are growing up, then actually we're finding a little bit more out about school trauma, particularly for pupils who've had sort of sensory issues that haven't been picked up and things like that. So it's interesting just to consider that term, because we don't want our pupils going through school not enjoying it, because you can't learn unless you're enjoying it. And it's a child's right, isn't it, to have an enjoyable education. So we want to make it as good as possible for them, which is really challenging in today's circumstances. So a couple of further challenges that worth mentioning, that, as a class teacher, you're always showered with gifts at the end of the year, aren't you? And when you're a SENCO, it doesn't happen quite so much. So I've had a lot of SENCOs on forums going, oh, I feel really deflated that all these class teachers are getting loads and loads of stuff, and I've put loads of effort in and haven't got anything. But you're the behind-the-scenes lighting person, I would say, like in a theatre. So, no one realises you're there until it all goes horribly wrong. So I think after, 20 years in the classroom, it was interesting to me to go to that behind the scenes role. And although I prefer the behind the scenes role, then definitely there's not always the recognition that you get from parents in comparison to when you are a class teacher. But I still, I've always said that I don't want the gifts. A thank you note is more than adequate for me. I'm more than happy just with a thank you at the end of the year for sort of saying thank you for getting my child the HCP, or thank you for advocating for my child. That is enough for me. I'm happy just to have some thanks and appreciation from the parents. I don't need anything else really. But just be aware that happens, that you are the behind the scenes person and not necessarily the front of house. Also, again, as I said earlier, a word of caution about parents who have difficulty being polite and for whatever reason they kind of let off steam at you. You're the middleman in this role, so you're a buffer between the parent and the LA and the school and the teacher and whoever else really. And an unhappy parent might not express themselves in a very appropriate way. But we can't see the hundreds of tiny things that have led to the explosion. So there might have been a lot going on that day for them. And like us, all of us, once parents feel heard, then they'll normally backtrack if they feel listened to. So it's really important to acknowledge that you do not deserve to be spoken to like that to start with, because nobody deserves to be spoken to like that. And if you feel that a conversation is becoming too heated, then you're going to kind of need to steer it and just either make sure that you're having it on another day and saying we're going to stop this conversation now for a future date, or steer it into a direction where it's a positive conversation at the end. So sometimes you'll get an irate parent that you completely agree with, and about a member of staff has said or done something that doesn't sound great to the child, or there's something in the paperwork that hasn't been followed up properly, which often happens. And so always investigate these situations before siding with the parent. And I've worked for people before who've shot first and asked questions later, and it's not fun when you're second guessing yourself. So always say, okay, thank you, leave it with me, I'm going to go and investigate now, and then come back to them sort of with the facts and with the sort of the teacher's perspective, and then you can have that conversation about how the teacher's going to change what they're doing, or maybe the pupil sort of communicated it in a way that wasn't quite the truth, as sometimes happens. So I know how difficult it is for teachers in classrooms with all these complex children to remember every little detail about a pupil's provision. Sometimes it's, attempts at humour can be taken the wrong way, for example. Sometimes we just don't engage our brains before our mouths. It happens to us all, and I've certainly said a couple of things over the years that I wished I've taken back. Luckily, the parents have seen the funny side of it. I think the prime example, I had a parent with one leg, and Holly in my class, it was fun. We got to a maths question, and the question was, how quickly can this man swim across a swimming pool? I think you had the options of 3 seconds, 3 minutes, or 3 hours. And I just said off the top of my head, well, even if he had one leg, I'm sure he'd have got there quicker than 3 hours. And then I was like, oh no, sorry, Holly. Of course, I'm sure your dad is a fantastic swimmer. So luckily she saw the funny side of that, and so did the family. So I kind of owned up to my mistake there. So owning your mistakes is really important. And we all make mistakes as class teachers as well in terms of provision. So sort of seeing it from both sides is really important. And just having a really thick skin when those parents are letting off a bit of steam at you, really, and just not losing your sense of humour. Okay, so just a few top tips for difficult conversations. You're going to need to steer it. Always remain calm and polite. Recognise that the parent has their child's best interests at heart. Acknowledge the parent is the person that knows the child best. Let them know that you understand that they are frustrated and that you want to help. Affirm that you know that no one advocates for their child better than a parent. Suggest that they make an appointment another time if it's becoming heated, perhaps with an SLT member present as well. Ask somebody passing to see if another member of SLT is available to support as well, or your head. Ask them to come in if they're ranting in the playground. Come and sit down, have a cup of tea, have a long chat. No doubt that you're going to have to drop everything that you were going to do that morning, but to appease this parent. But sometimes it's worth it in the long run. Say that you're unwilling to engage in this conversation until they can talk to you calmly. That's another one. And ensure that in future meetings that you're not alone with them if it's a particular issue. I had this with class teachers. Sometimes there's a parent who phoned this class teacher for an hour on a Friday night, and we had to have the arrangement where I spoke to them instead because it was just getting too much for the class teacher, really. So report to your head teacher if there's any issues or clashes, and hopefully that they will take it up with the parent and just let the parent know that it's not acceptable. We've had parents banned from sites before because of their behaviour or the way they've spoken to staff as well. But, you know, if you can diffuse a situation, that's great as well. So using a sense of humour, listening to what they have to say. You know, I've had many situations with parents ranting at me where we have indeed, it's just the way they speak, and then we've ended up laughing at the end. So if you can do that, then that's even better. But I appreciate, you know, particularly if you're the younger end of the spectrum, sometimes it can be really intimidating. So once you've been around the block a few times, I think your skin gets a bit thicker. So that's also a top tip as well for you. Okay, so lastly we have school avoiders as well. So obviously there's a lot going on here with school avoiders, and it's never good for pupils to not want to come to school. It's not what we want. So first of all, I'd say just for these pupils, just reframing your mindset, because I know it was a lot of the time we kind of used more derogatory terms in terms of not school avoidance, but just sort of other terms for them not wanting to come in. But actually, if we reframe our mindset and we want to make sure that school is a happy, comfortable place for these pupils, then that also helps to us to meet them halfway to solve some of the problems, really. So developing that relationship with the family is really important, as well as unpicking those individual barriers as well. So just find out what particular things are an issue for that pupil about school life, and see if you can help them to overcome them within class. Working with other agencies as well. I know for my local authority, if a pupil goes on a part-time timetable, it's an awful lot of paperwork, and you have to make the local authority know about that, and you have to check in with them as well. But if you can get other agencies involved to support the school with that as well. If you can set some home learning for them, if they're willing to do some home learning, that's great. You know, something that's high interest, low effort is always good, like a project on an animal or something like that. So, you know, something that they could email in and you can give them lots of praise for. That's fantastic. Starting that transition back to school, really important to do it in really, really tiny steps. So you might find that even like day one, the parent is just going to drive the pupil past the school. Day 2, they're going to go and park in the car park. Day 3, they're going to walk up the drive. Day 4, they're going to walk up the drive and come into the school. Day 5, they're going to go and say hi to the office staff. Day 6, et cetera, et cetera. So you can make the increments as tiny as that and the steps as small as that in order to work to get them back into school. And just to find that once they're back into school, ideally as well, just making sure that they've got enough support and that their anxiety is not high and things like that. So it is a really slow process, and sometimes you'll find that you think you're getting somewhere and the pupil goes back to square one again. So it's kind of it's a really difficult one of working with the family and any outside agencies that you can get involved as well, and to unpick the challenges that family is facing as well. And of course, you know, it's really easy for us as teachers and SENCOs just to go, oh, come on, just drag your child into school. But obviously when these children are getting a bit bigger, it can be a little bit challenging for parents, and we don't know what that parent has to deal with on a daily basis as well. So they're probably at the end of their tether. So, you know, we have to be quite empathetic to the parents as well with this. If they're not already on the SEND register, they've clearly got underlying SEMH issues. They need to get on that register and have targets based around anxiety. And their behaviour, they didn't wake up one day and just not want to come in. There's been an awful lot of build up to this, whether it's, you know, sometimes home life doesn't help if they've got separation anxiety, and school life sometimes doesn't help either with busy classrooms, etc. There can be a lot of anxiety based behaviour, and I've heard some people sort of say it in terms of the pupil manipulating the situation, but I kind of shy away from using the term manipulation, just in terms of you really want the child to be happy in school. And, you know, it is a grey area, because I know sometimes pupils can work quite hard to get out of the classroom, and you think maybe you could stay a little bit longer, but you really just need to try and meet them halfway and just leave, just appreciate their anxiety rather than thinking that they're just trying to get out of things, really. So they're my top tip for school avoiders, and I've got I think a blog somewhere as well about that if you Google that one as well. So hopefully that's helpful there, just in terms of parental communication, just because with this situation you really do have to work really hard with parents in order to try and get those pupils back into school. So that's the end of the main things. So I've got a couple of shameless plugs before we finish. So this is my children's book that came out last year, and if you're interested in purchasing it, then feel free to have a look at my website or have a look on Amazon. And it's had some good feedback so far, which has been great, and my children love it as well. And I've been doing some author visits recently, so that's been really good fun. And I've got another course running just on the 4th of September, just all about SENCO wellbeing, if you're interested in that. So that's all about the trials and tribulations of the role, protecting your own SEMH, raising your profile in staff meetings, etc., so that your staff actually understand what you do. Organisational top tips as well, as some time for some questions and answers too. So I'm really keen on SENCO wellbeing, and I know that your to-do lists are huge and you never have enough time to do anything, so it's sort of creating those boundaries for yourself, really. And just a couple of other places. I've got lots of freebies on my website with SENCO resources, so if you just go on there and click on that, and there's loads and loads of paperwork and things that you can just download for free. And that's not the front cover of my book, but it will be coming soon. I'm not quite sure how soon, but I live in hope that it won't be too long. So thank you for coming along. Thank you for listening. I've just got some time to do some questions if anyone's got any questions particularly. But these are all the places that you can find me. So if you just Google me, I'll be there somewhere. So also worth mentioning that I've done a couple of Zencasts recently as well. So you can find me on Zencast with Dale, and that's been linked to SENCO Wellbeing. And there's also one on starting out as a SENCO as well. There we go. That was bang on an hour.
Now you can go.
Thank you very much, Lynn. That was great. And as you say, bang on an hour. Well done. Nice timekeeping.
It's accidental.
Bless you. At one point I wasn't sure whether we should rename the elephant Dumbo, because he was actually flying across the screen.
He was flying, wasn't he?
He was. We did get one person comment about PVIs, and they put lots and lots of things into place for them, but then feel that the schools don't particularly support them, and they were asking whether or not there is somewhere they can signpost parents to. I think the answer to that is it's within your local offer. You need to look at your local authority, local offer, to see what's available. It's not something either Lynn or I can answer without being a part of your local authority, unfortunately.
No, and actually even my local authority, it's a nightmare trying to get anything for anybody at the moment. So I've had people come to me and say, what can I do in school, because there's nothing available out of school. It's just being left more and more to schools, which is worrying.
Yes, definitely. Definitely worrying. But I have noticed, to be fair, some local authorities, they created their local offer when we had the first iteration of the Code of Practice, and over the last year or so I have actually seen them update them. It's amazing. Updated local offers 8 years down the line. Wow. Yay. We're getting there. So just leaves me to say then, thank you very much, Lynn, for tonight's session. I'm sure everybody took plenty away from that, lots of ideas in there. Might nick a couple because I'm doing a TFE next week, which is a video version of a Sendcast for Dale. So I've got one of your slides kind of resonated with me quite well against something I'm doing. So
well, there's not an original idea anywhere, is there, Abigail? We just all pick other stuff.
Yeah, we just recycle it with purple instead. Magpie it. Okay, yes, we magpie it. So I shall pop that one in there and credit it to the right person. But thank you very much for coming along.
And Lynn just told them.